Let's move on to another concept which is related to list, right? And here I want to emphasize that in some programming language you're mainly focusing on using arrays, but Python allows you to both use arrays and list. And let's focus on what is list, right? So a simple way to define a list is you can assign L equal to just this braces, and that will create a list, right? And then you can append or add an integer to the end of the list. So that's what it is done here. So using this command L dot append 0, if I initiate this, right, if I initiate this command and if I print this, you will see I'm appending 0 0. So I'm adding 0 to again. So I'm adding at the end of it a 0. And we can also append a string to the list. So let's use this command. If I'm appending, now what our list contains, it contains two zeros and the John, which is a string. So the list can take in multiple different types of variables and assimilate them, or include that information in a single place. And that's one of the beauty of the list. Like the list could be including multiple different kinds of variables in itself. Okay. So let's move on. If I want to use, I want to append to the list, then I can also go ahead and I can also add an array to it. So now you can see 1 and 2, which is basically a vector that has been appended to the previous list of 0, 0, John, and 1. Okay. So you can see that the flexibility in declaring the list and using them for encapsulating different types of variables is an important functionality that is enabled by the lists in Python programming language. Okay. Now, if you want to get and if you want to do some tricks like what is the length, and if you want to go on to a specific location of the list, then you might be interested in knowing the length of the list, and you can get that by this information, which is length lenl. And if you run that right here, you will get the length of the list. Now you can see that you have 0 0 John, 1 and 2, which are the four different elements. Even though the fourth element has 1 and 2, which is a vector, but it's essentially located at length 4, and that's what is given by this command. So the overall list has a length of 4. Okay. Now, lengths are indexed, and the first item has an index of 0, and this is something that you need to understand. Some programming language, the index starts with 1. Some programming language, the index starts with 0. In Python, typically, the index starts with 0. Okay. So if I use this command L0, which is a list, L is a list, and if I want to find out what is stored in L0, or what is the list location at 0 is storing, I can run and I can get that information. So I'm running that information. I can see that a 0 value, which is an integer, that is being stored at length 0 location. Similarly, if I want to get first two item in the list, okay, I can use this command L0 semicolon 2, right? And this else braces semicolon 2, then I will be able to get the first two elements of the list. So 0 0 are the first two elements of the list. That's what we are able to get by printing L semicolon 2 that is out there. If I want to go to the last item of the list, what I do, I basically use this command L and then go to the length and subtract -1, because the indexing starts with 0. So I basically want to go to 3 because the length is 4. So I want to go to 3. So I took the length, which is 4, subtracted -1 from there, and that gives me 3. And that locates the last item in the list, and that's what is listed here that we have. Okay. So if I want to go and print just that one out, which was essentially a vector 1 2, we can print out by this command that I've shown here. Another way to print the last item is essentially doing length -1, and this is a simpler way of essentially implementing what we have done in the previous code. And again, same, it will result in the same output, which is 1 and 2, because it is going to the last item in the list, and it is printing out what is stored in that list. And in our case, if you recall, 1 2 vector was stored at the basically location L3. And so if you want to print that, L, just do -1 in the braces, and you will be able to go to the last item in the list. And that is a very easy way to access, even without knowing what is the length and so on. You can directly go to the last, and you can access that variable or whatever is being stored in the list there. If you want to do last two items, right, you continue on this slightly modified version, which is length -2 semicolon. And what it will go do, it will print the last two items in the list. So let's go ahead and let's execute that. So if I execute this, you will see the last two items that has been printed are John and 1 and 2. That were the two things that were stored in the list, last two items stored in the list, and that's what this command is printing. Okay. Now what happens if you want to replace the first item in the list, which was integer, with a float, right? What you can do is you can write this simple command. You can go to the length 0 equal to true. You can print, the overall item, and you can see that this item is 2, 0, and so on, right? So this is how you can essentially change what you're storing at a specific location and change that value. Okay. Similarly, if you want to add and continue on, what you can do is you can concatenate two different lists, right? So you can start with the initial list L, which is storing 4 element, and then you can call a new list which is storing a single variable here, which is given by braces 5 command that is out here. And if you print that out, right, this run this command, what it is doing, it is essentially taking the initial list L, which has 4 elements, which is now 2, 0, John 1 and 2, and then concatenating or adding 5 to that and creating a new list, which is basically having all the elements in the list L and also the new list, which is between braces with the 5, and that's what is being created, used to create a new list. Okay. What happens if you want to remove some item from the list or a specific location, right? There is a command that l.pop, that is what you can use, and you can essentially use that to remove the last item in the list. So if I run this, right, my list now, you note, is 2, 0, John 1, 2 vector n comma 5. If I want to remove 5 from here, if I want to remove 1 and 2 vector which was stored in L, then I can use this l.pop, which is here, and that will remove essentially 1, 2 vector from the list L, which had the 4 element, and now the number of element that we are storing in the list L is essentially 3. Let's start with another concept, important concept in Python, which is known as, dictionary. And one of the important things, they are very similar to arrays, but they, instead of working with indexes, they work with keys and values. And that's important in many different applications that you might be using. So let's see, how can you define a dictionary in a Python programming language. Okay, so defining an empty dictionary to save some stock prices is an example that I'm using. You can use this simple command d equal to curly braces, and that will start and initialize the declaration of a dictionary. And then similar to what we have done in the list and arrays, you can start storing different items. So what we are doing here, if you look into the first execution block that we have here, where we have created basically a storage place for storing the stock prices of different companies like Apple and Google and so on. So if I execute here, right, I now have stored the stock prices of Apple and Google, which has been instantiated to 143.0 and 2800. Okay. If I print, right, you will see that printing will allow me to list Apple stock is equal to 143 and the Google stock is equal to 2800. Okay. Now, what we can do is we can also define a dictionary and initialize it simultaneously. So this is what we are doing right here, where we are essentially taking d underscore new and initializing the Apple equal to 143 in Google semicolon 2800 d new, and that allows me to define a dictionary and initialize. So if you want to do that initialization, right? So let me run this right here. Okay. So again, This is the same thing that we are doing above. So this is another way of initializing a dictionary, and we can use this simple command where we can initialize multiple different things inside the dictionary at a one place. Okay. If you want to access, right, the dictionary, and if you want to get the Apple stock price, since we have created a dictionary, we can use a command like which is given here, d, braces, double quotes, Apple, double quotes, braces closed, and then if you run that, you will see that you can get the value of the Apple stock, which is 143.0 right here. Okay. If you want to modify the values in the what you have stored, right? For example, if you want to change the storage value of stock price from 143 to 145, then you can use the command that is given here, where you're using d braces double quotes Apple double quotes closed braces second is equal to 145.0. So if you run that, you will essentially now change the value that has been stored for the Apple stock, which was equal to 143.0 to 145.0, and that's what has happened here. If you want to remove the Apple stock prices from the dictionary that you have created, again similar to what we have done in a list, you have this essentially a pop command, which is dot pop, and then braces double quotes Apple double quotes, and you can use that kind of command, which is right here, to remove the Apple and its quote price, its stock price, from the initial dictionary that you have created. And now in your dictionary, you have only one element left, which is Google, and that was set to be value, that stock price of that was set to be 2800. Okay, so these are ways where how you can add different content to a dictionary, or remove different content from a dictionary, and how you can access different components of a dictionary. Okay. Now, similar to accessing last and the first commands and so on, what you can do is you can essentially use the length and other ideas that I've shown you in the list to also access different elements in the dictionary too.